Hey everyone, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to write an introductory paragraph for a rhetorical analysis essay. As you likely already know, on the AP exam, they recommend spending approximately 40 minutes per essay. Now, let's be honest, this is not a lot of time, especially with the task at hand. So what we don't want you to do is we don't want you to just sit there and have writer's block and not know how to start. And I've seen it happen before. Sometimes students have really good ideas, they just don't know how to get started. If this is the case for you, then understand this. The most important part of your introductory paragraph is going to be your thesis. It doesn't even have to be a super good thesis, it just has to be defensible. So if you're struggling to get started on exam day or in a timed writing situation, what I recommend is, if you're doing it on paper at least, to skip a few lines, write a thesis that's defensible, and then move on, because the bulk of your score comes from your body paragraphs, the evidence and commentary. Now, once you're done writing your essay, you can go back and then write your introductory paragraph. In this scenario, because you've skipped those lines, you can simply go back in and add it in later. Oftentimes, when students have completed an essay, then they feel more comfortable writing that introductory paragraph. Also, if you pace to the point where you don't have time to go back and write a developed introduction, that's okay. There's no penalty for skipping those lines, and at least you already have your defensible thesis. Let's say you're taking a timed essay and you do skip a couple lines because you're not really sure how to lead into your introductory paragraph. That's totally okay. But what are you supposed to include before you move on to those body paragraphs? Because you have to have something. Well, you're going to want to make sure that you have a clear reference to the rhetorical situation, because the person reading your essay needs to know what you're actually analyzing. You also need a defensible thesis. So this can be one sentence or 3 sentences, but it's usually pretty quick. A defensible thesis itself is going to reference 2 things: specific rhetorical choices and then the specific message, purpose, or argument. The prompt could ask you about one of those 3, so make sure that that's very clear. Choices and then message, purpose, and argument. That's the defensible thesis part. Now let me show you an example that combines the rhetorical situation and the defensible thesis into one sentence. Here's an example of a sentence frame that I give my students to help them write a defensible thesis statement. Now, it's okay to modify the frame as needed to make it fit your writing style, but one of the benefits of a sentence frame is that it helps you get your thoughts together more quickly. So basically, a sentence frame is the core and you plug in your own unique ideas. So you can see how that's done with the example below. If you would like more information about how to write a defensible thesis statement for rhetorical analysis, I do have a couple other videos that go into more detail. I also have other videos about the rhetorical situation and how to develop your evidence and commentary. So be sure to check out those videos if you need more help. Here are some other quick tips to improve your defensible thesis. Go ahead and pause now if you want to read these tips. Before I show you some techniques to use to lead into your introductory paragraph effectively, let's talk about a couple techniques that are ineffective. One is rhetorical questions. This might have been appropriate in middle school or junior high, but now that you are a high school student, generally speaking, it's better to not start with a rhetorical question. But if you do have an idea of a rhetorical question, take the deeper meaning that you want people to get to and turn that into a statement. That's usually better than posing a rhetorical question, especially if it's one of those yes/no questions. Something else to avoid, and I see this more with synthesis and argument, but I'm going to say it anyway, is please don't start with throughout history or, even worse, since the dawn of time. So you might be thinking, okay, if I can't use a rhetorical question to start my essay and I can't say something like since the dawn of time, but I do want to say something before the rhetorical situation in my thesis, what can I do? Here are the 4 options that my students have found most effective in the past. Now, these can actually be combined, so I'm going to show you some examples of what this could look like. This particular example shows how you can start your essay with a fragment. It also shows how you can reference the historical context, because you can see the phrase there, at the turn of the 20th century. I remember the first time an English teacher told my class that we were able to start our essays with fragments. We all thought it was really cool because it seemed like it was breaking the rules and it seemed super easy. Now, it is an easy way to start your essay in many cases, but you want to make sure that the fragment is actually meaningful. So in this case, it's trying to set the scene for what the work scenarios were actually like, the loud machines, midnight lunches, to really emphasize the harsh working conditions. You'll also notice that this particular example includes both a colon and a dash. Now, normally you probably wouldn't put both of those in the same sentence, but it works in this case. But one thing to keep in mind too as you're trying to improve your style is that you can use different stylistic elements like a colon or dashes or in a positive phrase to help your writing style as well. For this second example, we're taking an assumption that people have and we're flipping it. So in this case, the assumption is that many teenagers think it's a burden to wake up at 5:30 a.m. Now, it could be a burden to wake up at 5:30 a.m. As a teacher, I hate it too. However, the situation could be worse, and so that's what we're seeing here. So you see that, however, when considering the early 1900s, so we're working in the historical context as well. So this technique could be one that could be duplicated in many ways as well. Something else I like about this opener is that it attempts to situate the issue in a broader context. So it's looking at the issue through a modern lens, and there's also a bit of a lesson there at the end. So this could easily lead into specific references to the passage and then also a defensible thesis. I've used this previous example in a couple other videos, but I wanted to include it here as well because the previous two examples were just a lead-in, and then you would follow it with references to the passage and a defensible thesis. But it doesn't have to be that long, especially for a timed essay. You can start with a universal truth and then work from there. So here's an example of a relatively short introduction that is more than just a thesis. We've got the universal truth, a reference to the passage, and then that thesis. 3-ish sentences, super quick and very effective for a timed essay. If you're an APLing student, don't forget to click subscribe and turn those notifications on so that you don't miss any future videos. Also, if you're a TikTok user, go ahead and check out Coach Hall Writes on TikTok. I give several tips over there as well. And if you're looking for past content, check out the playlist I have for each of the FRQs. Those are full of videos with lots of tips.